Why are prisons such notorious places for being haunted? Well, when you pack lots of frustrated, angry people in one place together with varying criminal talents, you might have a recipe for murder and destruction. Today we dissect the paranormal events that take place at Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in Petros, Tennessee. For over 113 years, this building has served as a prison until closing in 2009. Confined to small spaces while inside, where there was nothing to look forward to each day but the possibility that you wouldn't get beaten or worse. Prison could be hell for many. And if they died inside, it seems their prison became an eternal one. So let's take a brief look at the dark history of Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, also known as the end of the line and the gates of hell, as well as the ghosts that have decided to stay. It opened in 1896 after a terrible coal miner labour dispute had taken place, lasting over a year. The argument was that the local labourers were not being put to work, as using convicts was a lot cheaper. Well, the state legislature got involved and eventually the miners were put back to work, while the prison was constructed by the prisoners. It was built set into the mountainous rock, and stone from the site was used to build the prison. Surrounded by the Frozen Head State Park and Cumberland Plateau, escapes were few and with zero success. Many deaths came about at the prison, even though there was no official death row. 3/4 of black prisoners were affected by syphilis, while typhoid fever, tuberculosis and pneumonia were also very common. If disease didn't strike you down, then there were certainly many prisoners who were willing to take their bitterness out on you, especially with gang-related fights. The guards would also be cruel, as they'd beat inmates for underproducing while working. But like often happens, the prison started to become extremely overpopulated, with 976 men residing in a building meant for around 600. The prison had this to say on the matter. Plans were drawn for a new structure to be made of reinforced concrete, and they made convicts break sandstone out of the nearby quarry to build the new prison. Constructed in the shape of a Greek cross, it stood 4 stories high, boasted battlements atop, and by 1934 was surrounded by an 18-foot stone wall. For a moment, things got better. The new prison was safer, more sanitary, and built in the shape of a cross, offering inmates a narrow path to redemption. For a period of time, the prison lost its reputation for fear, with the last stop comments falling away over time as the Brushy Mountain became known for criminals for lesser offences. By 1957, the whole was finally closed down, with the D block being built so that the hardened criminals could be kept away from those of lesser crimes. But the thing is, they built D block on the site of the old death house, which is where the dead bodies of inmates would be kept until their bodies were collected by their loved ones or buried at the cemetery close by. This added to the unease of inmates as paranormal activities started to increase. But then in 1969, everything turned back on itself again when the prison gained back its title of maximum security, now housing murderers, serial killers, rapists, and the worst of Tennessee's violent crimes. Now it was holding notable prisoners like Paul Dennis Reed, nicknamed the fast food killer, and James Earl Ray, who confessed to the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. From the date of opening until it closed, over 10,000 people lost their lives in many horrible ways. At its peak, the rumour was that there was at least 1 death in the prison per week. Things got so rough inside that fencing had to be installed on the upper floor balconies, as inmates would be fighting and then chuck the opposition over the railing to the concrete floor below. There were race riots, fires and murders taking place. Of the many events of violence that happened over the years, you can bet that many were never reported. Of those that were, they were disturbing to say the least, with 2 such stories coming to mind. Please be warned, they are horrific. One mealtime in the cafeteria, a fight broke out between 2 inmates. Now, one of these inmates was ripped apart in a matter of minutes, even before the guards could step in and break it up. You see, the prisoner who was murdered was chopped up into many pieces. Then when his body was recovered by the guards to take to the morgue, most of the guy's back was still stuck to the floor. Other parts of his body were even flushed down toilets. On another occasion, an inmate's arm was severed in a fight. And if this wasn't bad enough, another prisoner came along with a meat cleaver and severed the poor guy's spinal cord in 2. So it's safe to say that the kitchen and cafeteria areas of the prison were ripe with violence, and prisoners would constantly be on edge waiting for something to happen at any time. So let's take a look at who still lingers here, lost in their final moments of life. Our first ghostly inmate is Jack Jett, who in life was thought to be a snitch by the other prisoners. One evening while chatting with his mother on the phone, an inmate came up behind him, stabbing him 9 times in the neck, causing him to bleed to death on the floor. The prison phone area now has had many paranormal activities taking place, with cold spots and an immense sense of dread. But more creepy is the fact that inmates and guards have witnessed the phone receiver levitating as if Jack is still chatting with his mother, and just as suddenly, the phone will fall back on its hook. And while Jack's death might be seen as warranted in the eyes of criminals, as they say, snitches get stitches, but you weren't safe on relaxed evenings inside the prison either. One entity, which has now been called the Creeper, has been seen by many in the auditorium area. One evening, a fight took place while everyone was watching a movie, which resulted in one inmate having their throat cut with a handmade prison knife. But instead of taking the inmate to get medical attention, the guards dumped his body in a padded room where he eventually bled out. His spirit has been seen crawling on all fours as he relives those final moments of bleeding to death. When the prisoner James Earl Ray came to be locked inside Brushy Mountain for killing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., many race wars started inside the prison. After one particular attack on white inmates, an African American called James was shot dead. When he was alive, he loved to have his smokes, so today, if you place a cigarette on the bars of the cell he died in, he will slowly take pulls from it, with smoke being seen and smelt as if he is exhaling. As we discussed earlier, bullies were a day-to-day pest while inside, and one of these guys called Leroy happened to get a huge heap of payback dumped on him while he was in the exercise area. It is said that when he had his back turned to everyone while doing pull-ups, one of his victims came along and stabbed him. Visitors to this area have heard a disembodied voice whispering, "Leroy," when asked who was there, while also coming away with scratches as if our bully still hasn't learned his lesson. A place that no one ever wanted to be sent was the hole. There were many inmates who lost their minds locked away in this dungeon-like cell with nothing but their own thoughts to keep them company. Some even went blind from prolonged periods of darkness. Staff and guests have seen orbs of purple and red, which is concerning. It's believed that orbs which are white or yellow are spirits with a gentle nature, whereas the colours seen here are meant to be for more aggressive spirits, which is no surprise when you consider they're in the hole. As well as the angry spirits showing themselves as orbs, people have heard the sound of whispers and footsteps here too. Is there anywhere safe from ghostly entities in this prison? The answer to that is no. Even the prison chapel is ripe with paranormal activity. Various groups have picked up on EVP the words hell, beast and pain. Are these words from a sermon spoke many years before that is echoing in the present day? Or are these spoken to us as a warning of what lurks in the shadows? There are many tales from inmates stating that this is an area objects from the chapel can suddenly start floating around the room, and the cold spots don't appear to get any better in the hot months of summer. Many entities lurk along the hallways of Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, from shadowy figures that watch your every move, to a creature that has been seen looking like it's part man, part goat, and has cloven hooves. Is this the devil himself watching over the paranormal activities that are so extremely common here? The sound of slamming doors and the number of attacks from being touched, choked, scratched, growled at, or made to feel physically sick are really high too. Many believe that the property being built of sandstone actually amplifies the activity that takes place here. But it probably doesn't help either, getting built in and around coal mines where so many deaths have occurred from mines collapsing. Also, there is running water on 3 sides of the property, and it has long been believed that spirits cannot cross over water like this, which might also be another reason hundreds of souls are trapped here. Since it has been reopened, the grounds have become popular with paranormal groups and visitors waiting to see something that proves that death isn't the end for us. Have you checked out this prison? And if so, did one of the inmates make themselves known to you? Until next time, dissectors, stay safe out there.